Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be reviewing The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. We've got to talk about this book, y'all. Oh my gosh, I just finished it. My bookmark is like right there where the rest of this is like the author's note and end matter. We've got to talk about this book. So I actually had the audiobook to this first, and then I found the physical book. I think it was at Walmart, so I bought it and I actually read it. I didn't listen to the audiobook for this, but this was a book that I put on my November TBR, and as a part of the November TBR challenge that I did with my cousin Hannah. So I'll have that here as a card for you guys to watch after this review, so go check that out. It's a really fun video. First of all, my cousin often, before she read it first, explained it to me. My cousin often described this book as The Hunger Games mixed with like Skyrim vampires. And that is so accurate. I would say it's like an adult version of The Hunger Games. It feels like dark fantasy / gothic. It's got vampires in it, and it does have like this Hunger Games. It does have this Hunger Games situation, but it feels, because it's like gothic and dark fantasy, it's very, very gritty. There is a lot of like fighting and violence, which doesn't, like, to me, I love it. So it's like this perfect gritty kind of tone to it that kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones. And it doesn't get spicy until toward the end of the book. And it's pretty much contained to like one specific chapter, though it does get a little steamy in another chapter before that. From what I remember. I love this book. I'm trying to put into words how much I love this book because, like I said, I remember back when we were teenagers and the Hunger Games just kind of like swept all of us away and just became super, super loved and famous. And I remember the danger and the concept behind this, like, games where it was really dangerous, like, captivated me personally and inspired like my book Hunter and a lot of other writings like that, and I'm sure it inspired a lot of other people too. But for me, this not only takes another type of creature that I love, which is vampires. I love vampire books. Has a twist on them, and also, so it kind of like improves upon vampires, as well as improves upon the whole Hunger Games concept and takes it to new heights. I would say there's a few elements that are similar to ACOTAR, but it's not ACOTAR, and it's not Fae, and it's not a fantasy romance. This is a true just fantasy. It does have a romantic subplot in it, but it's very unique and it's very original. The ideas in it are, I don't even know how to explain this book. I'm at a loss for words because I just finished it seconds before I started this video. So I would say I do like this book better than the ACOTAR books. Just because it has this gritty tone and feel to it that I really love. And I don't know if that's the dark fantasy or the gothic aspect to it, but whatever it is, I really love this kind of stuff. And the fight scenes in this are so epic, and they get really intense, not only with the physical fighting, which always is really, really good and like really accurate in terms of like the fighting specifically, but because this also has magic, it does these epic magic battles that to me are like alongside of the kind of stuff that I really like. And it has this gritty tone to it that I absolutely adore. Like, this is the kind of fantasy book that not only do I strive to write, but I strive to find besides my own writing, and it's so hard to find it. So I do like the book better than the ACOTAR series, and I loved those books. Many of them were 5-star reads for me. And I actually think this, to me, is on par with Fourth Wing, because I loved that book as well. I would say it has the same amount of heavy world building and race building. It's just Fourth Wing is dragons and this is vampires. But I would say it works very hard to dig deep into the world building, the character building, the race building, the culture building of these vampires. And it's really unique in the sense that it takes vampires and has them have houses. Usually you find that with like fae. And that's where it's very similar to the Skyrim vampires, where you have this vampire clan. Like most vampire things that do have like a high fantasy with vampires, they have like clans or covens. This one does houses, so it has a little political to it. But within those houses, there are different like races of vampires. There's two main types. One of them has, I can't pronounce the names, I'm not even going to try, have leather wings. The other ones, the Rishon, have feathered wings. And that's also unique. You don't see a lot of, at least I personally haven't seen a lot of vampires in books that have feathered wings. And on top of that, they also have magic, and they have an entire magic system. There are also, you have the epic culture building that I would consider, that I would say culture building in the terms of like their gods and goddesses and a whole pantheon. So it kind of gives you some Greek vibes to it. And that it kind of has like a Game of Thrones vibe because it has that tone, that gritty, dark, it's not medieval like Game of Thrones, but it has that gritty tone and feel to it like Game of Thrones does, on top of the fact that it does have a system of gods and goddesses and stuff like Game of Thrones does. But I would say this is definitely like really Greek inspired, with like a pantheon, and the lore and the story and the history behind that is so fascinating. Like author Carissa Broadbent, please write a prequel of the main goddess in this, her story, Naxia. I think it's actually called The Crowns of Naxia is the series, which makes sense. So the other aspect to this is the romance, which is a subplot. It's not the main plot. It's a huge point in here, and I would say it's interesting because it's not a fantasy romance, and usually I judge that by, if you take the romance out of it, do you still have a story left? And in this case, yes you do, but also no you don't, because a good portion of why this story works and why the plot works is because the romance adds extra stuff to it that I feel like would be missing if you took it out. So it kind of is, but it kind of isn't. But on top of that, the main couple, Aurea and Rain, I like them better than Rhysand and Feyre, and y'all know, if you've watched any portion of my book reviews or my channel, I really, really love Rhysand and Feyre. They are one of my favorite couples of all time, and I certainly like them better than Violet and Xaden from Fourth Wing. So Rhysand and Feyre, for those of you who don't know, are the main couple in ACOTAR, the ACOTAR series. So what I like about this is that it is a true enemies to lovers romance, but which some would say that the Fourth Wing Violet and Xaden is an enemies to lovers romance, but I've never seen an enemies to lovers romance that did well. I remember in my Fourth Wing review, I said that, oh, it was really good. No, it wasn't. The Iron Flame did change that for me a little bit and changed my perspective about that enemies to lovers romance between Violet and Xaden, and I don't really like them as a couple. The romance in that, I would say in Iron Flame especially, is really the weak point of that, whereas in this one, it actually works because it's realistic. You don't just like, oh, I'm your enemy, and then I'm looking at you, and now we're in the throes of passion and spice. Like, that's not how enemies to lovers work. And that's why I would say this is not a romance, because romance are supposed to have happy endings. So that's all I'm going to say. And then on top of that, the other thing that this book does that's so unique to me is the strong female lead, Aurea. It does it so differently than I've ever seen before, because right now most of like fantasy and romance and all that stuff is permeated and flooded with strong female leads, and I hate it. It's a trope that is so overdone. I do not like it. I want more male heroes. But for me, this is done in such a brilliant way that I realized, one, the part that I actually hate is especially when they get arrogant about it. But in this, I feel like it's so unique with Aurea because she is a human in a world of vampires. So she knows her weaknesses. She has to consciously always be aware of those weaknesses because they will kill her. She is weaker than everybody else around her, and she has to be a good fighter to survive. There's no arrogance involved in it. She has to be strong just to stay alive. And that's why the strong female lead of Aurea works for me in this book. So, I mean, I've literally, like, the race building, the world building, the culture building, the legends, the lore, the magic, the romance, the main female lead, the side characters, her adopted father, Vincent, the lover, her lover, Rain, and the enemies thing, the Hunger Games plotline, the political world building, the magic system. It all works. I literally don't have, oh, and the writing style. I forgot that. I'm so relieved to finally have I don't know how famous she is. I don't know how big this book is, but I would say famous. Maybe not like Fourth Wing and ACOTAR famous, but I don't know. I haven't actually researched it, so, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to call her famous. We finally have a famous author who actually has a good writing style. I noticed this, a lot more in the ACOTAR series with Sarah J. Maas, but Fourth Wing, Rebecca Yarros does a little bit, because the thing is, famous authors are so famous they can get by with it, so their writing is not as tight as you'll see in some indie authors like me and the indie authors that I interact with. We go over with editors and we just edit to make our books perfect, because they won't sell as much, and so there's like a higher standard, I feel like, whereas famous people can get by with putting out pretty much anything and it won't be complained about. At least with ACOTAR, I saw a lot of editing things that I would use to tighten up. But my goodness, Carissa Broadbent, kudos to her, because her writing style is so gorgeous, and I didn't see any editing mistakes, nothing that pulled me out of the story. Her writing style, her descriptions, her vocabulary choices, it's not overly flowery, it's not Shakespearean, it's not trying to be dramatic, but it just is dramatic, and it's so well written, and it's so well described. In every scene, I can clearly picture the people and the setting, especially her setting descriptions are so vivid. There's no gray areas in my vision at all, like my mental reader's vision, as I like to call it. Which is a big red flag for me. Like, it drives me nuts if I have some gray area in my head and there's something that I can't picture because it hasn't been properly described. There's no gray areas. I can picture the characters, the setting, everything that's going on. The action scenes, I can clearly picture everything that's clearly visualized, and it's such good writing. And oftentimes I don't annotate, but there were several times where she wrote a line that really hit me, that was so good, that was just perfection, that hit me really hard. The emotions of the main character and even the other people, like the side characters, their body language, she shows really, really well, and it's not told to you, and it's just so descriptive that many times not only do we feel the emotions of the main character, Araya, but the side characters around her, we feel the emotions of them too. So it's like you're there and you're going on this journey with the character, and that's kind of what books are supposed to do, but it really, really was so true. On top of that, she also includes a lot of monsters, and I used to be a huge fan of Cassandra Clare when I was a teenager, but one of the things that I liked about her books was how well she describes the monsters in that series, and they're not horror quite, but they're on the brink of it, because I'm not a horror fan. I can't get into that genre. I will never be able to get into that genre, but when it comes to like monster stuff, I'm really a big fan of like monster movies and things, and so for me it's like right on the edge of like horror and some of that stuff, but it's so well described, and that also creates a lot of the really intense suspenseful action sequences, because they're fighting against these monsters that do this thing or have this kind of magic or whatever. And then I'm not going to spoil anything, so don't fear that, so don't be afraid of that. But let me just say the ending was, I knew that because my cousin mentioned that it ended in a way that she threw a tantrum and held a grudge for a while before she was able to move on and read the next books in the series. So I was expecting something, and that something happened, and then, which I thought was one thing, and then it was like a double twist thrown at me. And then it was just like, it kept going, and that twist kind of spiraled this whole circumstance that I'm reeling from it. I really am just reeling, trying to make sense of it, trying to process it. And it certainly makes me want to read the next book in the series, because it really sets up a lot more plot line, which is going to be like outside of the game situation that was set up in here. I don't know. The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King is the next book in this series. So I don't know what else I can say. Honestly, this is, 5 stars. Absolutely 5 stars. I would give it 6 stars if I could, because I do think it's on par for me with how much I enjoyed Fourth Wing. I would say Fourth Wing got me started immediately, like hooked me a lot faster, but this one just, when I got it, and I couldn't stop reading, and I just loved every part of it, and it's so unique. This book is so unique. So anyways, I would say that this is definitely my new favorite fantasy book, and it's definitely up there with my top favorite fantasy books of all time, because it is just so good, and I genuinely cannot wait for the next book. And from what I understand, it's a series of duologies, so the next book kind of follows up with this one and the same couple, and then the third book, which is actually coming out later this month, is starting a new duology with a different couple or something and a different plot. I don't know exactly how it works, but I'm really excited. And then between this book and book 2, there's a little prequel novella, not prequel, but there's a little short novella that's about a completely different couple that my cousin really liked as well. So I'm really excited, really into this. And like I said, 4-star rating. This is my new favorite fantasy. I would say if you don't like spice, it's pretty much it's pretty contained. So you got to watch out for that. And if you're not a fan of big violence and stuff, it may bother you. But for me, this is such a good book, and I do highly recommend it to people. Just because, especially if you like dark fantasy, gritty type fantasy, vampires, and if you're a fan of the Hunger Games but want something that's a little bit more mature and more adult, and if you're a fan of like gothic kind of style vampire stuff, I would say this is a good book and a good read for you. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I love this book. So if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, if you liked my review of this book, The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, then check out my review of Iron Flame. It'll be here as a card. I had a lot of fun with that book, and it was really interesting the way I had to get started and read it and everything. So check that out. It'll be here. You don't want to miss it.